Today, we're jumping into something really vital, a pretty complex market, actually.
Which one are we tackling?
We're looking at fresh food imports and distribution, specifically in the Pool-Aouest region of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
It's fundamental, touches everyone, but definitely operates under some unique pressures.
Absolutely. And look, we're getting our insights today from a really detailed sector analysis. And, their whole focus is providing that crucial ground intelligence, finding out what's actually happening on the ground there.
Which is exactly what businesses need, especially in places like the DRC, to make, smart strategic moves.
Exactly. So think of this deep dive as us unpacking the key finding.
Giving you that actionable intelligence about this specific market. That's the mission today. Well, it starts high level, fresh food, the vivre frais. It's not just another import category. It represents a really significant ongoing challenge in the Congo.
A challenge? How so? What kind of challenge are we talking about?
Well, look at the prices. The analysis flags a really steep increase in the cost of imported fresh food.
How steep?
We're talking a 20% jump just in 2022.
20% in 1 year. Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. For importers, sure, but also for, everyone buying food.
Exactly. It hits hard.
So what does the report say is behind that kind of pressure? What's driving it?
That's like a perfect storm, really. A mix of things hitting at once. Currency shocks, first off, the local currency losing value.
Right, making imports more expensive.
Then you have global supply shocks. Think like the war in Ukraine messing with food commodity prices and availability everywhere.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then domestically, falling mineral prices hurt the DRC's foreign exchange earnings. Less money coming in makes it harder to pay for those essential imports.
So the state is really squeezed between these big global forces and its own economic pressures.
Completely. And in that tough spot, the analysis highlights what the state sees as its absolute top priorities for this sector.
Okay, what are they focusing on?
Two main things for vivre frais. Number one, food security. Just making sure enough food is actually getting imported for the population.
Critical. And number two?
Controlling those big price jumps on essentials, trying to keep things affordable, or at least stopping runaway inflation like that 20% figure shows. It's a tough balancing act.
I can imagine.
Even though there are laws meant to improve revenue collection from imports, there's this persistent gap. Customs duties, which should be a big revenue source, aren't being fully collected by the public treasury. It's like a leakage.
A leakage that weakens the state's ability to act, presumably?
Precisely. It limits their capacity.
Now, this is where that ground intelligence becomes really practical, isn't it? The report doesn't just say, there's a problem.
No, it goes further. It actually suggests a potential way forward, focusing on what it terms grand importation.
The big importers.
Exactly, the large-scale players. The idea is, by using better, more targeted collection methods with them, the state could potentially claw back a lot of that missing revenue.
How much are we talking? Does it give a figure?
It does, and it's substantial. The analysis estimates up to $30 million US.
Wow, $30 million.
Over the next 12 months, potentially. It really shows you two things. The scale of the current gap and, the incentive for the state to get better at collecting from these major importers.
$30 million is definitely an incentive. You can see why that might become a focus. Okay, so that sets the scene, the challenges, the state's position. Let's pivot now to the market itself. Who are the players actually doing the importing?
Right. So the KIKS analysis breaks down the market. The two biggest import categories for fresh food in Pool-Aouest are frozen fish, and then this category called divers.
Divers? What falls under that?
That's mainly frozen poultry and frozen beef products. Those two fish and divers make up most of the volume.
Got it. And within divers, the chicken and beef, who are the main players according to the analysis, who has a market share?
Okay, for divers, it's pretty concentrated. You've got Sosimex leading the pack with 34%.
Okay.
Then Congo Future is right behind them at 32%. And Mino Congo has 18%.
So wait, those three alone? That's what, 84%?
Exactly. Over 80% of the imported poultry and beef market controlled by just those three companies.
That is definitely concentrated. How does the frozen fish market look in comparison? Is it similar?
Even more so, actually, at the very top. For fish, Mino Congo is the real giant. They control a massive 46% share.
Nearly half the market.
Yeah. Then Sosimex is second, quite a way back at 24%, and Trans-Congo is third with 13%.
Interesting. So we know Congo is a major player in both fish and the divers category.
Definitely shows they have a strong position across the board, doesn't it?
It does. Does the report give a sense of just how big this whole market is, like the total volume?
Yes, it aggregates the volumes for these key players studied. And the key CKS analysis indicates the total volume of this imported fresh food handled by these main actors in Pool List is over 200,000 metric tons annually.
200,000 tons. That's just staggering. Imagine the logistics.
It really underscores how vital this import flow is.
And if we combine those categories, fish and divers, what's the overall picture? How much of the total fresh food import market do those top players control?
Well, putting it all together, based on the volumes the analysis captured, over 70% of the entire fresh food import market in Pool List is controlled by just 3 actors: Minnow Congo, Sasamex, and Congo Future.
70%. Just 3 companies. That seems like a textbook definition of market concentration.
It really is, and the report actually quantifies that. It uses the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, the IHH.
All right, I've heard of that. What's the number for this market?
The calculated IHH is 2270.
Okay, and for those of us not deep in economics daily, what does 2270 actually mean in simple terms? What kind of market is this?
It firmly puts it in the oligopoly category, so not wide open competition. It's a market where a small number of very large firms hold significant sway.
And what does that feel like on the ground if you're trying to operate in this market? What are the practical effects of that oligopoly structure?
Well, it means serious barriers to entry, for one. These big players have scale, they have logistics networks built up, they have market power.
Makes it tough for smaller guys or new entrants.
Very tough. Hard to compete directly on price or volume across the board. It also means things like pricing, supply availability, even how the market reacts to shocks. All of that can be heavily influenced by what these few big importers decide to do.
So understanding them, their strategies, their capabilities, that becomes paramount if you're involved here.
Absolutely crucial. It's not just abstract numbers, it shapes the whole competitive dynamic.
Okay, that makes sense. So speaking of supply chains, where is all this food actually coming from? Where do these huge volumes originate?
Guess what? More concentration.
Really? Especially where?
Especially for fish. The vast majority, like almost all the imported fish landing in Pool List comes from just 2 countries.
Only 2. Which ones?
Namibia is the big one, accounting for 74%, and then Mauritania supplies 23%.
Wow, so that's 97% between just 2 African nations.
Exactly. Heavy reliance.
That sounds like it could introduce some risk, doesn't it? Being so dependent on just 2 sources for a staple like fish.
Oh, absolutely. Any disruption, maybe a change in fishing quotas in Namibia or a trade issue with Mauritania or even just logistics problems from those specific ports, it could ripple through the market very quickly.
Makes the supply chain potentially fragile. What about the divers category? The poultry and beef. Where's that coming from?
For divers, the main origins listed are Poland, providing about 50%.
Half from Poland.
And then another significant source listed as Belgium with 32%.
Belgium. That seems quite specific for poultry and beef. Does the report say more about that? Is it all actually produced in Belgium?
Ah, good question. And the report does clarify this. It's an important nuance that Belgium origin isn't necessarily where the chickens were raised or the cattle processed.
It's more of a logistics point.
Exactly. It largely represents shipments consolidated and routed through the port of Antwerp.
Ah.
So the goods might actually originate from places like the Netherlands, France, Germany, other EU countries. Antwerp just serves as this major hub for onward shipping to places like the DRC.
Got it. So it's a transit point, not necessarily the farm origin. That's key for understanding the supply chain.
Definitely. Shows the complexity of these global networks.
And the report ties these origins, especially the fish concentration, back to the state's priorities in the local context, right?
Yes, it connects the dots. That reliance on Namibia and Mauritania, for instance, reflects the structure of the Congolese fishing sector itself.
Right.
Well, when you combine that dependency with existing state rules, things like local fishing quotas designed to manage stocks or maybe protect local fishermen, it just highlights how critical those specific import sources are for overall food security.
So the state's management of those supply lines, those relationships, becomes really important.
Hugely important. The origins aren't just points on a map. They are intertwined with policy and food security strategy.
Okay, let's try and pull these threads together then. We've got this picture of a huge vital market, 200,000 plus tons annually in pool locust.
Right. Essential goods.
But it's facing serious challenges: inflation, currency issues, supply shocks, and there are these fiscal pressures, the customs revenue gap. Then you look at the structure, and it's heavily concentrated, dominated by just 3 main players controlling over 70% of the volume,
An oligopoly, confirmed by the IHH index.
with significant barriers to entry. And even the supply sources, especially for fish, are concentrated in just a couple of countries.
And all of this operates within a complex regulatory environment where the state is trying to balance food security with price control and fiscal needs.
So when you lay it all out like that, this is precisely where that detailed ground-level intelligence becomes less of a nice-to-have and more of an absolute necessity, isn't it?
Absolutely. If you are involved in food trading in the DRC, whether you're one of the big players, a smaller niche operator, maybe thinking about entering or even supplying services to this sector, understanding these specifics is just non-negotiable for making sound decisions. You can't operate effectively in the dark.
So why specifically? Break it down. How does knowing, say, Congo's fish dominance or the reliance on Poland, the customs issues, how does that directly help a business plan or operate day to day?
Well, it informs pretty much everything strategic. Your competitor analysis. Who are you really up against? Where are their strengths and weaknesses? Market entry. Are there niches the big guys aren't focused on? Supply chain strategy. Knowing origins helps you assess risk. Maybe diversify suppliers. Anticipate disruptions from specific countries. Regulatory navigation. Understanding of fiscal pressures helps you anticipate potential changes in duties or enforcement. Partnering. Knowing the players helps identify potential partners or even acquisition targets.
Right.
It's about seeing the whole chessboard. This level of granular detail, this ground intelligence, is what allows you to move strategically rather than just reactively, especially in a market this concentrated and complex.
It really is the difference between guessing and, well, knowing. And that kind of intelligence, based on what's really happening in Congo, that's the whole mission.
That's exactly their focus, helping businesses navigate these environments by providing that foundational ground intelligence for strategic decision-making.
So this deep dive gives a snapshot based on their analysis.
But the real power comes when you apply this kind of detailed insight to your own specific business situation.
Right. So for anyone listening who works in food trading in the DRC, and this conversation is ringing bells, making you think.
There are options. You can request the complete study that we've been discussing today. It has even more data, more detail.
Or perhaps even more valuable.
You could book a personalized audit directly. They can take this kind of analysis, plus much more, and tailor it specifically to your company, your challenges, your opportunities within this market.
That's the value-targeted intelligence for your specific needs.
Precisely.
Okay, as we wrap up then, maybe one final thought to leave our listeners with, building on everything we've discussed.
Sure. Consider this. We've talked a lot about the high market concentration, just a few big players, and we've talked about the state's clear interest, potentially $30 million worth of interest, in improving customs collection. So the question is, how might future state actions, maybe new regulations or stricter enforcement, specifically target those dominant importers? And if they do, what could that mean for the competitive landscape? How might it reshape the market not just for them, but for everyone else operating in the fresh food import sector in the DRC?
Yeah. How could shifting regulations change the game entirely? That's definitely something to think about.
Food for thought.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for walking us through that analysis. Really fascinating insights.
My pleasure. Always interesting to dive into the specifics.